Are you ready for a wild ride? We are about to talk about my third trimester, being plus size and pregnant, as well as my birth story, which includes a C-section. So let's get into it. So for starters, I'm obviously not pregnant anymore. My daughter is actually almost 2, and I'm finally getting back to YouTube. Um, but I'm not even going to spend much time talking about my third trimester because it sucked. I'm sorry. It was really, really hard. I was so sick my third trimester. I had a really bad cold. They actually thought I had COVID. Um, and I literally was just in survival mode. We had our baby shower, and it was outside, and it seemed like after the baby shower, it kind of like got worse for me in my third trimester. So I pretty much spent that time in bed until she got here. We had a bunch of stuff happen with Mike's mom around that time, and he had to go to Montreal. I was about 35 weeks pregnant during that time. And while he was there, um, I had my regular midwife check in, and the baby's heart rate was elevated. Because I was so sick, I was taking Sudafed, which is what my doctor told me I could take. But I think it elevated her heart rate as well as mine. So we had to go in for a bunch of testing while Mike was in Montreal. So that was a little bit stressful. He ended up coming home, and then they decided they were going to induce me. And so I was expecting, oh, I'm going to be induced. I knew it was going to take some time. My sister had been induced, so I like kind of was familiar with what that would kind of look like. It didn't go as I anticipated at all. So I go in to be induced. Keep in mind, at this point, I'm actually 3.5 weeks before my due date. She was due September 26th. And I went in Labor Day weekend on the Friday, I believe, actually. And so I went in, they started the induction process, had to go in at 12 hours to do a check, and then I had to go in again at 24 hours. In 24 hours, I had only dilated half a centimeter. And from that, I had a new OB, and he said to me, if you were my patient, I would have told you probably months ago that I believed we would have needed to schedule a C-section because her shoulders are measuring wider than her head, which means she's not going to be able to come out vaginally. And so I was freaking out, and I had to obviously think about what to do. There was running the risk of, well, were they really right? Was she really a big baby? Or was it just like because I was plus size, like, are they just assuming the baby was big? And then also like what that meant in terms of like recovery having a C-section. But if I didn't have a C-section, what could happen? And so he explained to me that if she got stuck, it could be in a position where they have to do some things to try and get her out, or it might mean I go through labor and then I still have to have an emergency C-section, which is actually more stress on your body because you would have been laboring for however many hours. Some people labor for days and then have an emergency C-section, and it can be like more high risk. So they sent me home for 5 days. My contractions had stopped because I wasn't really contracting very much. And I cried for the first 2 because I knew as a plus size personal trainer what that meant in terms of recovery. I knew that it meant longer rehab. I knew that it meant like rebuilding my core even more. And I was really, really nervous. So I legit cried for 2 days. But then we went in the day of the C-section. It was scheduled for noon. It didn't actually happen till 2. And I'm going to preface this now. This is not all happy. But at the same time, I wish somebody had prepared me for what a C-section would be like, because I had no idea. I've never been in an operating room. I've always been healthy. So I've never experienced anything like this, to be honest. And it was nerve-wracking. So essentially, I go in, they do all the checks. They're checking everything in the morning. Mike's with me in the room. They originally said that he likely wasn't going to be able to come in and hang out with me before the surgery, and they ended up allowing him, which was great, thank goodness. Because it was COVID time still, I was
It's
only,
really
and it was a
happening.
C-section, I was only allowed one support person. So my mom was not able to come. So I was like, Mike has to be with me. Like, I can't do this by myself. So he ended up coming with me, and finally it's time. So they take me into this room, and I walk into the room and I instantly start crying because I didn't know a surgery table basically looks like a stainless steel cross. And I mean, it's sterile, but I was like, oh my gosh, this is so scary. That is one thing I wish I knew going into this. I knew that there was a team of doctors. They wanted to take extra precautions just in case, and so there was extra doctors. Everybody was really nice. My midwife was able to come with me. Thank goodness she was there because they did the spine tap, epidural kind of situation, but they had trouble with it. They were 40 minutes trying to get it to happen with 3 different needle sizes. They finally had to call the head of anesthesiology, and it finally got done. But I was like throwing up, and when you have a C-section, you can't eat anything for like 12 hours before. So I had nothing in my stomach, and I'm legit strapped to the table and throwing up and like just crying and absolute agony. The meds finally like calmed down. And then the C-section starts. They walk Mike in. They weigh her, and I'm like, is she really as big as they said she was going to be? And she was 9 pounds and 11 ounces, 3 weeks early. So she was born on September 8th, 2021. She is our absolute pride and joy. She is like the happiest baby of life. She was pretty easy as a baby. She slept really well early on. And the only thing though, that was smooth. I mean, as smooth as it could be, with some things that I wish I had kind of like known ahead of time. But after getting into your room after you deliver, and getting like your skin to skin moments or whatever, they take you into another room and they do a bunch of tests just to like make sure the baby's okay and all this other kind of stuff. And they test blood sugar now. Well, her blood sugar was really low. And they checked again a little bit later, and it dropped even more. So then they tried to give her glucose, like in her mouth, and it dropped even more. It didn't change it. So they basically told us if things don't shift by, I think it was 6 p.m. that night, we're going to have to put her in the NICU. And by 6 p.m. it still hadn't shifted. So they put her in the NICU, and I was like, okay, I just had this baby. I don't get to really see her, hold her, and I can't stand up right now because I had the epidural, so my legs were still numb. And now she's going to the NICU, and I can't do anything. So I had to focus on trying to rest and sleep, and Mike could go visit her. But it was so hard because I couldn't see her. And finally, around 11 o'clock at night, I was able to stand and make my way to the NICU. And they had her on a series of things to help with her blood sugar. And apparently this is pretty common with smaller babies and larger babies, just that their blood sugar doesn't regulate on their own as a result of their size. And so keep in mind, I did not have gestational diabetes. I don't have diabetes, none of that. So it was something that I wasn't prepared for at all. And then she ended up being in the NICU for an entire week. And that's not something I've talked about publicly because it was like the hardest week of life. I would basically go really early in the morning into the NICU and stay for the entire day until like 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And I basically started pumping every 2 hours while I was there to try and get my milk to come in. And thank God it came in within less than 48 hours. But it was so hard because I had to leave her. Like, how do you just leave your baby in the hospital overnight, especially when you didn't think that that was going to be a thing? But we got through it. And her blood sugar level finally, after almost a week, like evened out. And then they had to like have like longer testing times just to make sure that it really was going to be fine on its own. So while she was in the NICU, it was a combo of breast milk and formula. And at this point, I just wanted to make sure she was getting fed and that she was okay. And then we finally got to bring her home, and that was a week after she was born. So nobody had been able to see her. She hadn't met her sister, her half-sister. She hadn't met my mom. She hadn't met any family. And so my mom was here when we got home, basically, and was able to help come and support for the week. But I wish I knew that these were things that could happen because I think I might have been better prepared. The other thing postpartum was my feet were so friggin' swollen. I thought something was wrong with me. And I kept like asking my midwife, like, are you sure this is normal? Are you sure this is normal? Like, it was worse than when I was pregnant. And it felt like my feet were going to explode. And she's like, it's fine. It will go away. It'll go away. So I had to make sure I was drinking lots of water and eating properly and moving as I could. But I was also so sore from the C-section. I will say though, I was expecting pain to be worse with the C-section, and I just basically stayed on top of Tylenol and Advil. And I made sure that I tried to sleep when I came home while she was in the NICU so that I was getting as much rest as I possibly could. But It was a lot, but it was all worth it. And she is like the happiest little thing. And she's now going to be 2 in September. And it's the end of May right now. So it's just a little wild. But I just wanted to share this story because, especially as a plus size woman, there's so much shame around our bodies in general. Then add on being pregnant, and then having a C-section. And recovery was challenging. Like, I'm not even going to front, and I'll make another video about that and what I had to do, and give some tips on that. But just know that your body is meant to do this. It is capable and it's strong. And as hard as it is, you will get through it. And it will be worth it in the end, holding your little one. So I hope that this is a little bit eye-opening, just so you can kind of like hear what a story was like. And be prepared if this is something that you are about to go through, or that you have gone through and you felt really alone with. Like, you're not alone. But that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this little story time, even though it was a little touchy. But stay tuned. I've got more coming up. We're going to be talking about the postpartum journey, and how I went from hardly being able to do anything to being able to get back to almost my full fitness routine, and kind of the things that I've been through with that. And we're going to be getting into some more things in terms of self-love and confidence and faith and all of that kind of stuff. Details are below if you want to hear more from me, or if you want to join any of my programs. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Stay beautiful.